Arun is our great hope within the State Department of Transportation because once, remember, it was a highway department. We have our ups and downs on where the different influences are, but he's done a great job at keeping us on track, keeping us informed, and certainly moving passenger rail along. And he did graduate from the University of Wisconsin a couple degrees. But the important role he's played is 15 years now. God, right? Working for WisDOT with passenger rail involvement since 2006. And currently he's in the railroads and harbor section, including managing our contract with Amtrak for Hiawatha, policy planning, and he also serves several national committees for WisDOT, including Next Generation Equipment Committee, States Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee, States Passenger Rail Coalition, and he worked on the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative. So let's welcome Arun.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks again for having me. How am I going to go after Derek? I can't compete with his majestic voice and turn of the phrase.
Yes, you can.
But in all seriousness, we are extremely lucky in Wisconsin and in the Midwest to have Derek and Ray as our Amtrak, Ray Lang as our Amtrak Government Affairs representatives. They're working for us all the time. We're in contact with them on an almost weekly basis, and we wouldn't be where we are without them and the team in Chicago at Amtrak. And really, so thank you, Derek, for everything you're doing for the state of Wisconsin.
We love what we do. We love you guys.
I haven't seen at Amtrak such a strong support and initiative taken for expansion that we're seeing now, and they have really been supportive and been taking initiative to support the states and their efforts to improve services. And I think I haven't seen to a level that I haven't seen in the past. So it's really positive. The cost reductions that we're seeing, the Hiawatha service, are hugely beneficial. Really, there's, in terms of expanding passenger rail on the regional routes at the state-supported level, operating costs and operating support reductions are one of the most important things. We're going to keep working with Amtrak and encouraging them to keep driving the cost down, because that's going to be, one of the #1 things that helps us expand passenger rail, increase frequencies, and expand new routes. Even if we can reduce the cost at the state level as well as at the national level of doing passenger rail. So I will get started here. I'm going to talk about current routes and expansion projects, the Amtrak build the TCMC, the Hiawatha 10-round trips. Also our Milwaukee Airport Rail Station project that we have going on now. Potential new throughway bus service, a little teaser, and then talk about the Wisconsin budget. So this is the first time I've met with you since our new administration. We have been in transition. We had a lot of work going on to transition to the new administration, and it's been very, very positive. There's really dedication to look at all options on the table in terms of transportation, in terms of improving our roads, public transit, passenger rail, the whole gamut. So we've had several meetings with the administration and had made a lot of progress. So the existing Empire Bill, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think everyone knows it, but it's really already a success story. So when you talk about the TCMC, we're not starting on something new, and this really reduces the risk of TCMC and makes it a very viable route compared to a lot of other routes nationally. So over 100,000 riders annually just on the Chicago-St. Paul segment of the Empire Builder. That's comparable to other one round-trip routes that are considered very successful, like the Blue Water in Michigan, or the Blue Water is a little more than that, but other one round-trip routes across the country. And the Empire Builder is already doing that. I mean, I've ridden the Empire Builder several times within the corridor on random weekdays and off-peak season, and the train is always packed. So I think it's really doing well. I think capacity has been reduced on it, but the train is always busy. Regional travel, 70% of on-offs in Wisconsin are going to locations within that Chicago Twin Cities corridor. So people are already trying to use it for regional travel. The one round trip per day, obviously, everyone knows that limits transportation options, especially for business travel, regional travel, or business community. And as we all know, significant delays can occur eastbound when you're coming from Seattle and Portland. And that is a huge challenge for regional travelers and business travelers. And the TCMC is really going to address that issue. So getting to the TCMC, Twin Cities, La Crosse, Milwaukee, Chicago, second daily train. The plan is to serve all existing stations plus the Milwaukee Airport. Operate at a maximum speed of 79 miles an hour. It would be a daytime running schedule that would complement the Empire Builder schedule. Leaving Chicago roughly around 9:25 is a few schedule options, but just to give you an idea. And arriving in St. Paul around 4:45 p.m. And then eastbound running St. Paul around the noon hour, and arriving to Chicago in the evening. It has a 30-minute shorter travel time than the Empire Builder, and that's because of the nature of how regional trains operate, how the long-distance trains operate. And it also will have, as Derek mentioned, more reliable and better on-time performance. CP rail, best close railroad there is, and it's a shorter distance and it originates in St. Paul. So the objective of the TCMC is to provide that schedule flexibility and reliability to make regional travel, to really meet the regional travel demand across the state, and address the latent demand for regional service on the corridor based on what we're seeing, the travel patterns we're seeing in the current Empire Builder ridership. We want to also expand transportation options in the corridor and strengthen multimodal connections between the communities. La Crosse, for example, community along the corridor, has very limited air service, a few flights per day, high cost, and one round trip bus, an intercity bus serving it, going up to the Twin Cities in Milwaukee. And are we really, with that level of service, supporting economic development, economic growth in a city like, a community like that, or do we need to ramp up a bit? And you have Logistics Health, for example, downtown La Crosse employs 900 people. Their ability to retain and attract employees, it just underscores the need to improve transportation options to continue that economic development and see communities like La Crosse. Provide an alternative to congestion controls and parking when accessing Milwaukee, Chicago, and Twin Cities. Those are economic powerhouses and for companies that are located in Tacoma, La Crosse, or anywhere else along the corridor that need to have communications with companies in these cities. It's great. People do not want to, they have to go to downtown Chicago or even downtown Milwaukee, battle with the congestion and the tolls and the parking, and they're looking for other options. And so the TCMC would help address those issues. And then also, again, supporting the tourism, economic development, jobs, as I mentioned. The benefits that, and I've already mentioned some of these, of why we're interested in the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago. Again, the regional travel, the greater ridership on the additional train, looking at the community level. The greater ridership with the additional trains means more people coming into the station communities, and supporting local businesses there. There was an example in Columbus of a business in downtown that saw 5 to 10 customers from Amtrak every day. And when you're a small business operating on small margins, that's a big deal. And so what happens when you double the people coming into these communities every day for the Amtrak service? We are, as I said, addressing limited area city and rail options. I got ahead of myself. Help communities attract and retain business and jobs and increasing tourism dollars. So what do we need to implement the TCMC? We're putting in 79 mile an hour, 279 mile an hour, adding 270 mile an hour passenger trains on a single track railroad, basically. So there's infrastructure improvements that the host railroad will need in order for us to be able to say we're mitigating any delays to freight operations. We don't want to harm freight operations. They're extremely important to the state economy as well. We've gone through a planning process, we've gone through railroad simulation modeling, workshops with the railroads, and identified some infrastructure improvements to support the additional trains while maintaining freight performance and maintaining CP's ability to keep dispatching passenger trains so well at such a high on-time performance. Those includes new sidings, siding in La Crosse, track work in La Crosse, Monona, River Junction, a new crossover in Columbus, signaling improvements, and so on. And so we need federal and state funding to fund those infrastructure improvements. We will also need additional funding from states for the operating support. And that's a big deal. And the operating support is, of course, operating costs minus revenues. So we have about $6.8 million in the rail appropriation right now in our yearly budget. Probably need to, when you consider the shares from Minnesota to the operating support and others, well, we'll probably need to bump that up to about 8 or 8.5 million from the 6.8 per year to support the TCMC, in addition to the 7 round-trip rail officers that we're supporting with 6.8 now. That is around what anybody in the industry would expect for something like this. And we really have to look at what value are we getting for that investment, and is it a good deal for Wisconsin taxpayers? And we've really been digging into it and looking at this, and this one looks like it is a good deal for the economic benefits. The RPA, you're probably familiar, just did a return on investment study for the TCMC, and found a 7-to-1 return on investment for this investment. So we're going to be doing a similar return on investment study, benefit cost analysis in the very near future. But it's going to be more conservative than that, but fully anticipate that it's going to show a positive return on investment for this service in particular. And that's very important. So when we talk about, well, there's this operating support that's going to have to be in future state budgets, very important that it shows a good return on investment for that investment. And we wouldn't do it if it didn't. So the progress to date we've made on the TCMC, the feasibility study, the forecast for ridership revenue cost, that's done. The operations analysis, that includes Amtrak's operations, how they would operate it, a couple different scenarios, and how the operation analysis for the freight railroad and what's needed to increase capacity. That's been done. We've done conceptual engineering of the improvements that I mentioned previously, and capital cost estimates for that infrastructure. And we started the environmental clearance process on those. And the findings of all that, we found that there's going to be about 55 to 76 million in infrastructure costs total on the whole corridor in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and depending on what scenario, and that could change a little bit. And so the worst case for that 76 million, if we applied for a federal grant for final design and construction, and we wanted to have a 30% match from the states to the federal grant. The minimum required is 20%. If we wanted to have 30%, it would be more competitive. The worst case is we need about, and if we're only just for illustration purposes looking at Minnesota and Wisconsin contributions with an Amtrak contribution, we're looking at about the need for 10 to 12 million from each state in state funding to match the federal grant to do this. The ridership that was found to have comparable to similar corridors, very, very positive, 155,000 annually. Operating support is required, as I mentioned. Would become one of those state-supported routes that Derek mentioned, routes under 750 miles. And then I also, as I already mentioned, the strong return on investment that was found in the RPA study, and we're also going to be doing this in So what's the next steps? First, I'll start off with the WisARP position. As you may have known, the previous administration sort of warmed to the TCMC. The current administration is very supportive of the TCMC. They've sent a letter to the Secretary's office, WisARP Secretary, and they sent a letter to the Minnesota DOT Commissioner, officially expressing Wisconsin's support and desire to move forward and pursue this and implement the service. So we've been working very well with Minnesota. At this point, we're going to continue working well with Minnesota. It's a very good relationship and very positive step for the TCMC there. So what do we have to do now? We have to complete the environmental clearance. As I mentioned, we started it. It's luckily, it does not look like it's going to require an EIS or an environmental assessment. Most of these improvements are going to be categorical exclusions, which significantly reduces the cost and time for getting this environmental clearance done so that we can get on with the final design and construction. So that's very good news. We also have to finish the service development plan. It's already been started. A lot of work that Amtrak has done towards that. This work can probably be done, we get started now, and we do have money in our budget to get started now and approved to start if we get the matching funds from Minnesota in 6 to 9 months. So if state matching funding is secured in the budgets of Wisconsin and Minnesota, we will be able to apply for a federal grant for final design and construction and implementation of the TCMC. And that could happen later this year, next year, depends on when the federal grant programs that Derek mentioned are appropriated and available. And then finally, we apply for that grant for final design and construction. Switching gears to the Hiawatha service, as Derek mentioned, all-time record high ridership we had in calendar year 2018 of 858,000 passengers. That's a 3.6% increase over the previous year. Over 94% on-time performance. 75% of the costs are recovered by ticket revenues. It's one of the best performing routes in the country. And there's increasing demand and capacity issues. As we all know, there's crowding on the trains, almost peak trains. Amtrak has been very helpful in opening the old Metro lounge for the multi-ride ticket holders to be channeled through, so there's less crowding in Union Station. That's a new development, and it was a very good innovation on Amtrak's part on using an underutilized space to address an issue that we're having. But
Can you tell them we renamed it?
Oh, no, yes.
Well, we renamed it the Hiawatha Lounge.
The Hiawatha Lounge.
Oh, wow. Cool.
We have standees on these peak trains, and so we're looking to address those issues. Ultimately, we'll need to increase frequencies, but some equipment updates related to Hiawatha service and all of the Midwest state-supported routes. Amtrak is completing, and it's funded by the states and Amtrak jointly, a refresh of the existing Horizon coaches that are being used. And like that top photo there, Amtrak already has completed a refresh on Amplity equipment, and a similar refresh is underway right now as we speak on the Horizon coaches that are used on the Hiawatha and other Midwest routes. Big improvement. If anybody's ever seen the refreshed Hiawatha or Amfleet coaches, it's a huge improvement. But that's kind of a temporary fix because there are new Siemens coaches being manufactured right now that are coming to the Midwest for the Midwest states Portage routes that will be delivered between 2020 and 2022. The Hiawatha service will be equipped with 6 of those coaches. One of the Hiawatha contests will be equipped. That is thanks to a federal grant to the states to purchase state-owned equipment. That was an ARA stimulus funding grant, 100% federal funds. WisARP has also submitted a grant application last month to add another 6 coaches and 3 cab coach cars to fully equip the Hiawatha service and increase the capacity of the Hiawatha service with this new equipment. And as you all know, we're continuing to work on the Hiawatha increase in turnaround trips. The environmental assessment is being wrapped up right now, and we're working on addressing comments on the EA, and as Derek mentioned, doing some more simulation modeling, et cetera, to try and address the issues in places like Glenview. And that should be wrapped up very soon. We'll get that into the Federal Railroad Administration. And then the project is eligible for final design and construction grant funding, similar to the TCMC. So the next steps would be to secure state and other funding matches and apply for a federal grant for final design and construction. There is significant opposition in Glenview. Opposition is mostly to freight trains and a extended connection track between the CP and the UP, because all now traverse a short connection track between the CP and the UP to get to the CP's Bensonville yard in Glenview. That connection happens in Glenview. One of the projects, 8 infrastructure projects that are needed to increase capacity on the railroad so that we can add the additional trains and keep dispatching them on time, is extending that connection track so that, like a left turn lane, if a freight train has to stop to wait for a signal to get onto the UP, they can do that on this connection track and not block any hangover onto either main line, either the CP or UP main line, and cause even more congestion. So by doing this, this is not about holding trains, this is not about stopping trains. This is about improving the fluidity of trains on both main lines, and which will in turn reduce the instances of where freight trains do have to stop there briefly. So it's like a left turn lane, and the connection track is adjacent currently to some neighborhoods. The extended connection track would be on the existing UP right-of-way, but the neighborhoods adjoining there and the City of Glenview are 100% opposed to any improvements at that area. So we've done additional work, and we're wrapping up the additional ongoing work to try and address those issues. If there's any improvement there at all, the opposition will still be there. They've hired lobbyist attorneys and everything. So that opposition will be there if there are any improvements remaining in that area. But hopefully we can address a lot of the issues and move on. I already talked about the Amtrak Midwest Initiative, so I'll skip over that.
But it had the number. How many connections?
That box there is kind of an example of what we want to try and promote and market here, because Milwaukee to St. Louis right now we have improved connections, as I mentioned, with improved schedules. We want to promote, twice daily. You can go to Milwaukee to St. Louis. A lot of people in Milwaukee, a lot of users of the Hiawatha service don't even think that way. But that is an opportunity of improved connections to Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Milwaukee, Detroit 3 times daily. So there's really a lot of opportunities provided by these state-supported routes in the Midwest. The other issue that we are looking into and working on right now is the Green Bay Fox Cities I-41 really public transportation options issue. Greyhound pulled out of that corridor last year, so that means at least between the Appleton Fox Cities area, Oshkosh, Fond du Lac, Milwaukee, and Chicago, there's only one round trip public transportation option per day. And we have almost 600,000 population between just Fond du Lac and Green Bay. And there's only one round trip per day option to Milwaukee and Chicago. And is that really supporting economic development and mobility on that key I-41 corridor? We don't think so. So we're looking at options to try and address that issue. One of them was going to Amtrak and saying, what about doing a different kind of thing, at least different for Wisconsin, and having an Amtrak throughway bus, similar to what is Amtrak operated throughway bus, similar to what's done in California, the California throughway bus service, and in North Carolina, where you have Amtrak branded buses, higher end buses, contracted through our Amtrak contract to go along I-41 at least twice, additional round trips daily, serving all those communities and having guaranteed tight connections with the Hiawatha trains to Chicago, and being designed to allow people to be able to do a same-day business trip to Chicago with somebody in Appleton, for example, can leave at around 6 a.m., get to Chicago at 9:30, do their business, come back on the 508 train, getting back home by about 9. And so we are in negotiations with Amtrak right now to implement this service. I was hoping to have something a little more definitive, but we're still in talks, so nothing's certain yet, but this is something that is being worked on, and hopefully we'll have some news on that soon. Those buses would also extend to the airport as well, so it'd be sort of like a very limited airport express. So the big thing on everybody's mind, of course, is the Wisconsin budget 2020 to 2022, and this is really key for these passenger rail improvements. The governor obviously released the budget proposal in February, and that included a continuation, no change to the rail appropriation, which is what we use for the Hiawatha operating support. So that's good. That was continued. We also use that for studies and grants. But it also included a proposed increase in bonding authority by $45 million for passenger rail improvements. So that can address matching funds, which we talked about previously, for these projects. The legislature is going to start working on developing its own budget, or taking the governor's budget and making changes to it. They're probably developing it from scratch, my understanding. In, I believe, April, this month, or next month. So we'll have to see, that that number would obviously have to be in the legislature's budget for it to be a real opportunity. The issue again is that we have 2 passenger rail improvement projects that are ready for grant for final design, construction, and implementation, and that's the Hiawatha 10 round trips and the TCMC. State matching funds in the budget for both Wisconsin and Minnesota are needed before we can apply for federal grants. We can't apply for federal grants to get any of this done without matching funds in the budget. So that would mean, if we're relying on this biennial budget cycle in Wisconsin, if the funds don't get in, then it'll be another 2 years, and then we can, take a look at getting the funds in 2 years. But the budget process is going on now, and really, and to clarify things for the TCMC, that environmental clearance, we have money in current budgets to finish it up and be ready to apply for this final design and construction. So that project is ready, and but however, with the caveat that matching funds would be needed. You can't apply for anything without it. So one of the eight projects for the Hiawatha increase to 10 round trips is building a second platform at the Milwaukee Airport Rail Station. Hundreds of people use that per day. It's a busy station. So that freight trains can go on either track and passenger trains can go on either track. That will increase capacity and reliability. It's needed for 10 round trips increase, but it's also needed now to improve ADA access, improve reliability, etc. So we applied for a grant, and we were we will be awarded that grant. We found out we were selected. So very good news there. We're working with the FRA now on the grant award, and final design and construction of that major station improvement will get kicked off later this year. That includes a new platform on the west main track. It includes a new elevator towers with up and over access to that platform with an enclosed bridge. Don't think Sturtevant so much as Dearborn, Michigan, or Troy, Michigan. This is an airport station with a lot of people and a lot of luggage and a lot going through it, and so it does have to be built thinking about the future and at a higher level. So HVAC, sealed elevator towers and bridge with large elevators, et cetera, to meet the loads and demands. So that project, that's an exciting project, and that is getting started. That's been awarded. So now I can open it up for any questions. Yes.
First of all, back on your objectives and benefits slides, with the current administration, is it not time to add health/clean air and climate protection to those slides and make them official objectives?
Yes, absolutely, and I will
Picture deck.
I will make a note of that.
Secondly, is there any possibility to further expand Hiawatha capacity by lengthening trains?
We have, out of necessity, been working with Amtrak to try and predict when we're going to see surges and add cars on a case-by-case basis. That hasn't worked that well because it's now getting to the point where it's hard to predict and it's just happening. And it's difficult for Amtrak that they got to scramble to get another piece of equipment.
So equipment is the main barrier, not station size or platform length?
No, it's availability of equipment. And so we've been looking at permanently adding cars to the two trains. The problem with that is that it comes with a significant increase in operating costs. Amtrak's costs for that are pretty high.
So like cleaning and maintenance?
Well, you need another assistant conductor that's triggered by a seventh car. And the other challenge is, we have these peak trains that are full, but then those other trains through the middle of the day have significant riders not on them and have good ridership, but they only maybe be half full. So we're hauling around dead air, a couple of cars on those, and adding costs for those midday trains. And the terms are so tight that we can't pull a car off and change the cars around. So it is a big challenge, and we're continuing to try and work with Amtrak to address it temporarily. Ultimately, increased frequencies are needed to spread that ridership out and also meet the demand for more peak trains. It's not just about the increased frequency, it's very important. It's not just about addressing the crowding issues that we're having now, even though it will, but it's also about growing ridership and addressing travel demand on the corridor.
Last question has to do with the budget and the $45 million. As we contact our legislators and watch this play out, I assume that $45 million is finely tuned to be just enough money. Can any less money in the in the legislature's budget still allow us to move forward? Or do we know how much is needed for Hiawatha and how much is needed for TCMC, and, you know, what is our wiggle room?
Yeah, I think that was based off looking at matching fund needs for grant applications. So that, you know, that's what it was based off of. Obviously, there's still things that are in flux. You know, the cost of the Hiawatha might go down a little bit due to some improvements that are happening anyway in Illinois, and the airport station grant that we got. So, is there wiggle room? I think we would try and work and see what we can do with whatever funding is appropriated.
But as a bullet point, when we're contacting policymakers, should we be saying we need both of these projects really badly, and anything less than 45 million, really, we really need all of that money?
Well, I mean, I'm not in a position to, you know, I think that it's fair to say that that 45 million is representative of what would be needed for matching funds to move these things forward.
In this 2-year budget. Thank you.
So, yeah, on the same issue, because I'm somewhat unclear, and Joint Finance Committee hearings are coming up, not next week, but the week after, and that's an opportunity for citizens to go before the Joint Finance Committee and make their points. So the 45 million, that's not the Evers budget, that's what our aspiration is. What's in Evers budget right now? What's the figure in Evers budget?
The figure that came out in the governor's budget document was 45 million.
Was 45 million, but you just said, I thought, and I'm very unclear, of the 45 million, that the budget hasn't changed from the previous budget. So if the previous budget didn't have enough money for the expansion, then how can 45 million have enough money?
Oh, that's first. So that's totally two different things. The budget that hasn't changed was our operating budget for operation of the Hiawatha service. So that was really more about the Hiawatha service, that we could be able to continue to operate it and you know, make little improvements to it with that operating budget. So that operating budget has remained the same in the governor's proposed budget. What's changed is that the governor included an increase in bonding authority to address capital needs and matches to federal grants to do these expansion projects.
So the 45 million is the governor's budget, which includes enough capital bonding and capital expansion to do these improvements?
That would address, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What is the status of the passenger rail plan, and do we have anything equivalent to what Minnesota's done in projecting several years in the future?
State rail plan is will need to be updated soon. So we're in discussions on how to do that, and when to do that, etc. So really,
It's in the works.
It's in the works. Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard that the city of Madison has purchased like 15 acres at Oscar Mayer. One of the things they're talking about, of course, is for added space for a bus barn, but they're also talking, some have talked about a possibility of intermodal station. Has WisARP gotten involved at all on that, as far as an intermodal that would access inner-city bus, as well as putting it along a rail corridor, that at some point in the future it would be a rail station? Has there been any discussion at all about?
I think that'll come. I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, but I know that the city has done that, so that will probably come out of those discussions, both on public transit level and rail level.
One last question.
Yes.
In anticipation of the TCMC, is there any way to improve the bus connection between Madison and Columbus? I know the delays are tough, but the schedule doesn't even work when the trains run on time.
Yeah, I definitely, that will be an opportunity that will be looked into if the TCMC is implemented. that fast connection, because that's been an issue. We've tried to look at ways to do it through the existing Empire Builder, but it's a huge challenge, obviously, with that. But yes, that would be something that would be looked at.
Let's give Arun a big thanks.